What's up, everyone? It's time for This Day in Philly Sports History for October 28th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Monday edition of the podcast of Victory Monday, an impressive Victory Monday. More on that in a second, but let's do some quick housekeeping. First, follow me on social media, Jimbo_Mont at Twitter and TikTok. On Instagram, at PhillyJimbo. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, Jimbo_Mont, and then spread the word. If you're enjoying this, likely someone else in your circle will too. So let's continue to spread the word and outsmart the algorithm. I did want to mention, and this kind of got me thinking a little bit. I had a couple people reach out to me yesterday on various social media asking about how come I didn't cover the day that the Phillies won the World Series. Well, that's because technically yesterday was the start of Game 5. And we know it didn't officially end until 2 days later. So yesterday was the first part of Game 5, the first 6 innings. That's why I did not mention that yesterday. But it got me thinking, if there is an event or something you want to hear me cover, send your submissions over. I do a pretty good job researching and keeping my ears open if I hear something on the radio. A lot of times during Philly seasons, they did I think it was the Chick-fil-A nugget of the game. And if it was something I didn't think of or had, I would jot that down. So I have pages and pages of Excel sheets full of notes sorted by dates and things like that. So if there is something you'd like to hear covered, feel free to submit that to me. Any of the social media, you can comment. If you are on YouTube for the channel, I believe my email address and even my phone number is there. If you find me on LinkedIn, whatever you got to do. But it did get me thinking. But no, I did not forget about when the Phillies won the World Series. It was just yesterday was part 1 of Game 5. All right, it is a Victory Monday. Go to Philly Goat and celebrate. I was looking through their Eagles gear today. They have you covered. They got birds, eagles, I should say, as my mom would say, fly. They have Victory Monday t-shirts. And then you can get one of those cool varsity cooler bags that they make a great gift. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to buy me a cooler for my birthday, which is coming up, I'll take the backpack one. And be sure to use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. But Philly Goat's got you covered for the birds. Go check it out, phillygoat.com, promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. And then be sure to check out my boys at the Clash and Conferences podcast if you haven't this week already for football. Big game for Topher's Giants tonight. I think they're in Pittsburgh for Monday Night Football. And then the baseball episode dropped on Friday as well. Slowly wrapping up the baseball season. This week will be their season finale. And from whatever I'm hearing, it's going to be a fun show, so be sure to tune in this week for the Clash and Conferences podcast. All right, let's get to that Eagles game. Flat out, the best game I've seen them play since maybe the Buffalo game last year. Top to bottom, everybody was it was on point, and it's always good, and I saw a lot of not only good, but great things in that game. But before I get into that, let's recap our 3 keys to the game yesterday. I said it falls on Jalen. Jalen needs to have a game, and he needs to really go toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow. Well, I think I would be willing to go out there, and this isn't a stretch to say it. Jalen outplayed Joe Burrow yesterday. 16 for 20, 236 yards, and a touchdown. Didn't quite get to the 300 mark that I said, but he was solid. He was pinpoint accurate. I think he missed a couple throws, but 16 for 20 with some of the throws he made, I would gladly take. 37 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and just no turnovers, which was probably the most important. And really, he outplayed Burrow. I think I noticed, and we talked about this on one of my text chains, he's got some swag back. My brother pointed out that he's 2022 Jalen, and if he's got that swag and he's playing, look out, because when he has that swag and he's clicking on all cylinders, I think that is a dangerous Jalen Hurts. He wasn't afraid to run. He just seemed more confident in the pocket. And earlier this season when he would drop back, I get nervous that he was either going to throw an interception, hold it too long, take a sack, or run for no gain. But he just had a presence in the pocket. He was commanding, confident, and that is vintage Jalen, as I called it yesterday. I said they need to get off to a fast start, help the defense out, and score in the first quarter. So they did not score in the first quarter. Part of that was because Cincinnati went on a 10-minute drive. They did score on their first drive, though, early in the second quarter. So that was a good sign, too, I think. And then they could have gotten flustered a couple times, but they stayed focused and got it. And like I said, between Jalen's confidence, getting off and scoring on their first drive, I very, very pleased with what the offense did. And then the final key on defense, I said, do your job, stay within yourself, don't get frustrated. And they very easily could have gone south after that first drive because Cincinnati dominated them. Literally just ran right down the field. They had no answers for Chase Brown. Joe Burrow was picking them apart on third down. And it could have been very easily a replay of that Tampa Bay game. But they got it together, played well, held Joe Burrow in the offense to 280 yards, only 58 rushing yards. Most of them came on that first drive. They did only get one sack, but they had solid pressure on Burrow. He's just a good quarterback. I mean, that's why they didn't really get the sacks, and he gets the ball out fast. Did force 2 turnovers. The interception was classic tip drill. It was incredible. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I forget the way it went, but either way, it was a great. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson tipped it to Isaiah Rodgers, or it might have been vice versa. Either way, it was perfect. And then the punch out that they had on the fumble was just incredible. Guy held him up, came in, punched it out, and there was 2 key turnovers late in the game. And then Cooper DeJean, this is a very underrated thing or play in that game that nobody's talking about. His tackle on Jamar Chase on fourth down, that if they'd have gotten that first down, we might be talking about a different game. But man, we were not used to seeing our DBs tackle and wrap up like that. But this dude's a player. So overall, they weren't perfect, but they didn't have to be because the offense bailed them out finally. And you could see it because I noticed just the whole aura around the team. They didn't necessarily feel like they had to press. They played their game, stayed within themselves. And overall, I give them an A for an overall score, top to bottom, offense, defense, special teams, coaching. Nick Sirianni made the right calls to go for it on fourth down, had them ready to play, which I know he hasn't really all season. So I cannot be disappointed or mad. Unfortunately, I did see some people on Twitter, the same people probably, who were like, oh, let's see what they do against a good offense in Cincinnati, saying, yeah, well, it was the Bengals. So you're never going to make anybody happy, but I like the way they're playing. I think they're getting some of that swag back that we didn't see really since 2022, to be honest. So I will take this win on a Victory Monday. Just some notes I had that I took during the game. Nolan Smith now has a sack in 3 straight games. Huge for him because I know a lot of folks were about ready to give up on him. Maybe he's going to have a similar career trajectory as Brandon Graham. If you remember, we almost didn't. Nobody really wanted him to be re-signed when he was re-signed. But I'm ever so glad that Chip Kelly did re-sign Brandon Graham. The tush push is just elite. I know they got stopped on it once, and really it took a great play by Jalen to hold on to that ball and throw it or lean it over the goal line for the last one. But the tush push, I love it, and they're starting to run the variations of it. And again, like I feel like they just are confident every time it comes out there. Jalen now is second all-time on the Eagles list in rushing touchdowns. He passed Wilbert Montgomery. So now he only trails Steve Van Buren. And the way his career has gone so far, he will likely pass that at some point. But again, the final word on this, great win. I feel, like I said, the offense found its swag. And if you can have a confident Jalen Hurts, I almost called him Jalen Swagger. That's a WWE name. But Jalen Hurts having that swagger, I think is going to be dangerous. And like I said, that was the first time all season I saw him in the pocket just confident and really taking control and knew what he was going to do. Like I said, I used to like cringe early in the season, but he got the ball out when he had to. He took off running confidently when he had to. And that pass to Devontae was just absolutely incredible. So I think the bottom line is I've been very tough on Jalen. It's good to see him snap out of whatever it is. I want to see him continue to do that, and I think he will. Like I said, he just has a different mindset than what most people do. He's a winner. He does win games. Sometimes it's not the prettiest, but he does win. He's far from perfect, but again, yesterday, he didn't need him to be perfect. I think yesterday was one of those everybody did their part and played a role in that win. Offense, defense, special teams, all of them. And I will say, for all of you out there who said this would have been an acceptable loss, this was an acceptable win. Miss me again with all that acceptable loss stuff. If you were following on the bet, we did win. We moved to 4-3 on that. The Eagles not only covered, but won outright. The over also hit. And then if you really were following on the prop bets I threw out there, Jalen had an anytime touchdown, and so did Devontae. So if you were like me and you followed along with the bets, you made some money. All right, recapping the NFC East. Washington with a ridiculous win yesterday, 18-15 over the Bears. No reason they should have won that game. Absolutely. We should be in first place right now, the Eagles, but instead we're a half game back of Washington. The Bears defender, I would cut him immediately. Like, I would not have let him he would have been on the plane back to Chicago. If you missed this, it was all over Twitter last night and this morning. The defensive backs going down the sideline talking trash to the Washington fans, realized the play was going over, ran in, and instead of batting the ball down, tipped it up so Washington was able to score the game-winning touchdown. Horrible. I would have made him walk back to Chicago. Like, you are cut. I don't care who you are. You should have been cut. That is absolutely ridiculous and inexcusable to not only be talking trash to the fans on the last play of the game, but you're taught to knock the ball down. You don't tip it up, especially if you see the guy standing behind you. So, like I said, I would cut him on the spot. Cowboys lost. Their offense looks terrible. Trayvon Diggs was snapping back at a reporter who posted something on social media. I have to laugh at this because it's 2024, but he hit him with we can talk about D's nuts. Hilarious. You got to love the Cowboys. I called it at the beginning of the season. They're a dumpster fire waiting to ignite, and I think it's starting to smolder a little bit if it hasn't already. The smoke is starting to come out of the dumpster, and I, for one, am all for it. And then I mentioned earlier, the Giants are in Pittsburgh tonight. That could be an ugly, ugly, ugly game. But likely it'll be like a 13-10 Steelers win. But that's the NFC East. Good win for the Eagles. Biggest win, best win of the week. Second straight week for the Eagles for that. And now it's time for the question of the day. Who was the GOAT of the game? I'm giving you three choices. Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, or Devontae Smith. 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Get that. Anything else Philly sports related off your chest? Want to talk about the game? It's all fair game. There was a Sixers game last night, Flyers game last night as well. Want to give me some ideas for future this days? That's all fair game. But who is your GOAT? Jalen, Saquon, or Devontae? I'm going Jalen. I've been hard on him. And like I said, I saw a different Jalen Hurts yesterday than what I've seen all season. And truthfully, dating back to like the Buffalo game of last year, he was confident. He had control. And like I said, that swag is back. We might have to start calling him Jalen Swagger because I like that name. But who's your go-to the game? 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. All right, speaking of that Sixers game, what a game. And I will say it was a gritty win. They held it together. They battled back. Tyrese was awful early in that game, and then he put it together in the second half and in overtime. The Sixers come away with the 118-114 win. Tyrese ended up with 45, and the way his teammates kind of supported him, if you watched or listened to any of the post game. They were all supportive of him. They told him to keep shooting. He was in a slump. He worked through it, and he hit some big shots down the stretch. I was a little concerned with some of the foul shots they were missing. I was trying to explain to my kids as we were watching the end the importance of hitting foul shots. And then, of course, they miss them and then allowed the game to go into overtime. And it was a lot more of a nail-biter than I think it should have been. But overall, good win for the Sixers. And he just shot his way out of his funk. And I think this was a good win, being that they did not have Joe and PG. Caleb Martin was outstanding, 17 points, 12 rebounds. Just like I said, a solid win on the road against a good team in the Eastern Conference and a much-needed win. You don't want to start 0-3, especially the way they played in the first two games, and the way they battled back and the way they stuck with it. I really was impressed with that win. So hopefully this week we get some good news regarding Joe and Paul George. But we'll take the win, 118-114 in overtime out in Indiana. Flyers not as fun as the Eagles and Sixers yesterday. They lost 4-3. Travis Sanheim with 2 goals. But the Flyers gave up 3 goals in the second. And they've been having those periods where they're giving up a ton of goals. And I think it's probably because they're a young team still. But to their credit, they're a scrappy bunch. They keep battling back. But you gotta limit those bad stretches. And it seems like this year so far, like they get off to either a good start or get themselves in a hole and have to battle back. And if you got to think, if they didn't have to battle back so much, maybe they'd have more than 2 wins. But they're back up in Boston. Tough game tomorrow up in Boston. Bad news as well. Cam York is going to miss at least 2 weeks with an upper body injury. It's a big blow to the defense because they've actually been playing well, him and Sanheim together. But hopefully it's a minimum of 2 weeks, but it could be longer according to Danny Briere. So that's a huge blow for a team that's been struggling with giving up some big periods as is. All right, today we are going to go back to 2009. And on this day in 2009, Game 1 of the World Series, it was CC Sabathia versus Cliff Lee. Game 1 up in New York. Utley hit homers in the 3rd and the 6th. Cliff Lee had that ridiculous catch in the 6th, if you remember, where he just looked like he was bored to be there. Stuck out his glove on the pop-up and just was like, okay, let's go. Phillies had a 2-0 lead heading into the 8th inning. Raul Bañez hit a 2-run single in the 8th. Shane Victorino hit, and Ryan Howard had RBIs in the 9th as the Phillies pulled out a 6-1 win, Game 1 of the 2009 World Series, to take a 1-0 lead over the Yankees. Cliff Lee pitched a complete game, struck out 10, gave up 6 hits, only allowed the 1 run. Chase Utley 2 for 4 with those 2 home runs. Unfortunately, the Phillies will lose the next 3 before winning Cliff Lee's next start in Game 6, and then we all know what happened in winning Game 5, and then we all know what happened in Game 6 of that series. But on this day in 2009, Phillies beat the Yankees 6-1, Game 1 of the 2009 World Series, and we all, if you think back, we were all thinking repeat, but it was not meant to be. All right, speaking of Chase Utley, today's 2024 Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame inductee spotlight is on Chase Utley. And rarely is there a slam dunk shoe-in at this point. Like, once the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame started 21 years ago, you had the slam dunks for that first induction class. But Chase Utley is a no-brainer inductee for the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Spent 13 years here in Philly, played in over 1,500 games at second base. He's a 6-time All-Star. Remember the All-Star game in New York when he said, "Boo, F you"? One of my favorite Chase Utley, and one of those underrated Chase Utley moments. He was a 4-time Silver Slugger, 5 NL East titles, 2 NL pennants, a huge part of that 2008 World Series, especially that in the World Series Game 5, that fake throw that kept the game tied, where he looked like he was going to first base, threw it home, and got the out. And I think that was, and I've said this before, I think it's one of the most underrated plays in that World Series. Everybody talks about how good Hamels was, Joe Blanton's home run, the clutch hitting in the second part of Game 5. But if Chase Utley does not make that play, I think we go game 6 and go back to Tampa Bay, to be honest with you. And then, of course, what best known for his speech, he was Jason Kelce before Jason Kelce was Jason Kelce. And we all remember the clip, world champions, world effing champions. One of my all-time favorite Chase Utley moments, that and the boo, F you. But all-time, he's 5th all-time for the Phillies for doubles, 6th in home runs and runs, 7th in RBIs, extra base hits, and total bases, 9th in hits and game played. He's 1st in hit by pitches and 9th all-time in Major League Baseball. If you remember, Chase Utley had no problem just sticking an elbow out and taking a base. Always taking one for the team, that Chase. But he was clutch, and I think we all talk about Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard, but Chase Utley was very clutch in the postseason. 262 average with 10 homers, 25 RBI, and I think it was like 35 games they played, including hitting 5 in that 2009 World Series. So say what you want about that team and their leaving championships on the table. Chase Utley certainly did his part when the money was on the line when it came time for the Phillies in the postseason. He is a fan favorite. He is a borderline Major League Baseball Hall of Famer. Got a decent amount of votes last year in the election, or the voting. I'm actually anxious to see what he does this year with that vote. Famously dubbed the man by the legend Harry Kalas, Chase Utley, you are the man. And on November 7th, Chase Utley takes his place among the all-time greats in Philly sports when he is inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame as part of the 2024 inductee class. But today's spotlight for the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame inductee class, Chase Utley, the man, the legend, one of the all-time fan favorites in Philly, one of those guys that always had his uniform dirty, wasn't afraid to muck and grind and do the little things. And like I said, one of the most, I think, underrated and probably the most important play of that World Series was his fake throw. Because if you go back to Tampa Bay, who knows what happens? They steal Game 6 and all of a sudden it's a do or die Game 7. So Chase Utley is today's Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame 2024 inductee spotlight. On this day, back in 2009, Chase Utley hit 2 of his 5 home runs in the 2009 World Series as the Phillies beat the Yankees 6-1 to take a 1-0 lead. Cliff Lee was just outstanding, pitching a complete game, striking out 10, but it was just not meant to be. And I still go back to that stupid home run that A-Rod hit off the camera that shouldn't even have been there. And that really changed the whole momentum of that game. And then the Hideki Matsui when nobody was covering third and he stole 2 bases. But that's another story for another time. We'll have more on the Flyers and Sixers this week. Remember to get your vote in for who was your go to the game. Jalen, Saquon, Devontae, 267-495-8531. Get that. Anything else Philly sports related off your chest. Let's go. Good win. It's a victory Monday. 37-17 over the Bengals. And I don't care what anybody says. That is an acceptable win. I don't care if their opponent. The Eagles have now won 3 in a row. But more importantly, I think they got their swag back. So let's go. And the schedule is somewhat favorable now heading into the next 3 games. They got Jacksonville, Dallas, and then Washington. So that Washington game looks like it's going to be a huge, huge matchup, thanks in part to the ridiculous play of the Chicago defensive back who should have been cut on the spot and had to walk home from D.C. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History for October 28th, 2024. My name's Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a good Victory Monday. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.